I wonder if I would search for your ancestors, let's say 200 years ago, where would they be? You can unmute yourself, just if you know, where were they about 200 years ago? What countries, what places?
Poland and Russia.
Poland and Russia. Same
Poland,
here.
Russia.
Ireland
Poland,
and Sweden.
Ireland and Sweden.
Italy.
Okay. And if I would ask our ancestors 200 years ago for their associations of bread, I wonder how similar and how different their associations would be from ours, or if we would ask them to bring their bread of choice, you know, would they even have accessibility to so many different types of breads? And I wonder with the, like, we heard beautiful bread stories, but I put this word bread in front of our eyes like that with no image, because each image that I would put would bring a whole other set of associations. So if I would put this one, now if you're Israeli, this immediately speaks to your childhood, to my childhood, okay? This is the basic bread. Or if I put this one, or this one, or this one, or this one, yours were much nicer, by the way, but but each one of them arises a completely different set of associations, and they're all based on our stories, on our journeys, on our cultures, on our identity. And the interesting thing is that if I would tell you that this talk is about what happens when you bring flour and water together and you turn them into dough and you make a baked good out of it, none of the same associations would rise. And I've asked this question about associations, I don't know, hundreds of times probably. And the word bread of itself, or lechem in Hebrew, you spoke, I came in when you were talking about music. The word bread is almost like music of itself, of the way it touches people and the level of emotions that it brings up, just like that. Or the smell of bread, what it does to us, just like that. So we're going to dive together today into different aspects of the world of bread and the role of bread within people and cultures here in this land, and maybe in other places beyond. I'll introduce myself on a foot, just like for a minute. So my name is Tamar Linchevsky. My oldest profession is tour guiding. I've been a tour guide. It's my 30th year now. Started when I was 18. I'll be 49 in 2 days from now. And during those years, I was seeking for more meaningful ways to touch people. So I went to study the therapeutic world. I'm a social work and nature therapist, a group facilitator. Like, I'm very much involved in the world of, self-exploration, and I bring all of this knowledge into the work that I do. What I've been doing mostly in the past year was developing different talks that really bring my passion to connecting the outer world with our inner world. So looking and connecting to ourselves through different things. And one of them is food. My major topic of research is The Hero's Journey, if any of you are familiar with it, by Joseph Campbell, and like different ways to work with it. And this is really my biggest passion, what I'm bringing to the world now, is this how mythology and culture can help us transform our lives, basically. About, when is it? When I was 20, almost 30 years ago. Whoops, sorry for that. I grew up in the center of Israel in a very, very Ashkenazi, meaning, you all know what Ashkenazi is probably. My family also came from Poland, totally non-religious environment, very elitistic, but I had a dream to live in Jerusalem. And you were all in Israel, right? Right. And did you all go to Machne Yehuda food market? All right, so this is where I lived. I lived right off Machne Yehuda food market. I was 20. I came to Nachlaot, to this colorful neighbors. From each side, different window, I had a different synagogue, Kurds here, Iraqis there, Yemenites here. Like, it was an amazing, amazing experience. I loved any moment of it. But there was one thing that really bothered me. And this one thing was that wherever I would go, I would see bread laid out in the streets. Just anywhere. Little bits of bread, more bread, tons of bread, just everywhere. And I was thinking to myself, what's wrong with these people? Why don't they throw the bread to the garbage? Where I grew up, hoarding, you say in English, right? Holding on to bread, not throwing it out, was completely connected to Holocaust trauma and nothing else. And I looked at these people and I was like, really, like, they're nice, but they're so, like, I don't know what's wrong with them. And one day I had the guts and I spoke to one of my neighbors in Achlaut, in the neighborhood. She was actually a crumb queen, I'd call her. She would collect crumbs, and every morning in this ceremony would go out to this big yard and throw out the crumbs, and tons of pigeons would come and eat. So one day I asked her, what's the story with the bread? She says, what do you mean, what's the story? I said, why don't you throw it to the garbage? And she looked at me shocked. And she says, what do you mean why? Bread is not to be thrown away. And I was like, but why? And she says, what do you mean why? Bread is not to be thrown away. I said, yeah, but why? And she says, bread is not to be thrown away because bread is a blessing. And I was like, what? She said, bread is a blessing. And and she said, okay, you sit down, young lady. And she knew she was very strong. And I sat down. And he said, now you listen. And I listened. And I was very arrogant at the time. I probably still am. I always have things to learn about becoming a bit more humble. And she said, listen, every action that is connected to bread making in Judaism has a specific mitzvah, commandment, or a specific blessing that is put into the process. From the moment you put the seeds into the ground to when you harvest and you leave the leftovers for the poor. We're approaching Shavuot and the story of Ruth and all of that. When you sift the flour, when you do the dough, the ceremonial separation of the dough, when you bless before and you bless. And I was like, you really do all these things? She said, where did you grow up? I said, in Petach Tikva. She says, okay, now you come to my place. She said, you come here. And she started giving me Jewish education. This was the beginning of you grow up in Israel and you get a lot of Jewish education, but it had nothing to do with the inner levels of religion and tradition, the way I grew up. And it triggered me, this story of the bread and seeing it all over in Jerusalem. And I was a tour guide. I came to Jerusalem. I wanted to learn, to know Jerusalem. And I knew that the best thing to do in order to learn a place was to teach it. So I started guiding. And what I realized, and excuse me for this crazy collage, but it's a tiny bit of people that I know in Jerusalem that are all involved in bread making or in ceremonies that are connected to bread. Jews, Muslims, Christians, you name it, it's everywhere. And then I realized that bread is not just bread. Bread is a gateway. Bread is a gateway to understanding people. And bread is about relationships and it's about communication. Now, you said before that your son told you how your cooking is a way of expressing your love. And I find bread to be a tool, a means of communication, communicating different values and different emotions. Love is one, but there is a scale of different things that are being brought to the world through foods and definitely through breads. So I went on this crazy journey and I've been exploring breads and the role of bread in cultures, I don't know, almost 30 years now. By the way, I don't eat bread, but we bake a lot at home, but I'll maybe talk about it a bit later. And if I don't, you can remind me. And if you just walk a little bit around the Machne Yehuda food market, you can really learn the story of the Jewish people in the land of Israel through the breads, because you find from Jabetas to Persian, Iraqi, Georgian, challah, bagel, you name it, it's here. And it's the story of this crazy fusion that has been created in this land for the past 73 years of people coming from so many different places, bringing their breads with them, and you know, continuing to create their own breads. And it's just like the bread that I actually brought, my bread that I brought to show you. I don't know if you can see. Okay, ooh, it's from the freezer. I don't have any bread from us. Ours will probably bake towards the weekend, but this, can you see it? I don't know if you can see. It's spelt pita. So it's spelt pita bread, which is taking the most local Arab bread and making it, you know, healthy, trendy, you name it. And this is this, for me, in this little piece of bread is the story of what's happening in this country. Okay, one aspect of what's happening in this country in terms of bread. So we're going on this journey, as I said, together, and I want us to meet some people along this journey, and one of them is Hassan. This is Hassan, and down here it's me, probably 9 years ago, a little bit pregnant, maybe 10 years ago, a little bit pregnant with my first. And I used to to take people on bread tours and bring them into different bakeries. And Hassan used to work in Machne Yehuda. And here he stands, and his oven is very, very special. The oven where he used to work was brought from Iraq about probably about 100 years ago. It's this huge round oven, and the bread that they make is named ashtanu, which is those large flat pitas, similar to naan maybe, or and he stands there and he talks to the group about the bread and how the oven is like the womb of the mother, and the bread comes out of the oven and it gives life. It's named ashtanu. Aish in Arabic, if anyone speaks Arabic, means like Aisha, life. Tanu is the oven, so like the baby comes out of the womb, the bread comes out of the oven, and he's like, you see, it's full of like all of this story, and suddenly a piece of bread is burnt in the oven. And then he asked the group, why do you think this bread was burnt now? And they say, what do you mean why? You spoke to us, you didn't pay attention. It was burnt. He said, no, 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 no. You're from Tel Aviv. You don't understand. He said, why was the bread burnt now? And they said, well, we probably don't know. So you tell us. So he said, now, do you see the box over here? Can you see there is a box right behind him? Okay. There's another box right up here to show you. In this box, he tells them each little piece that is being burnt or being, falls on the floor or whatever, I put it in the box. And at the end of the day, this guy that lives in the mountains in Beit Shemesh, he comes and he picks all of the breads that were collected in this box, and he throws it in the forest for the animals. Now, Hassan tells the group, you can see his finger. He says, God saw a hungry animal in the forest, and therefore God burned the pita. And for me, it was one of those aha moments of realizing really that it's not about bread. It's about communication with God. It's about something that you deliver, it's much, much, much bigger than something that's going to feed people or is going to help Hassan bring bread to his family. Because you know that in Hebrew, the word lechem is not just this piece of bread that you eat, but it also means the earning. It means sustainability. Yeah, it means, the base of life is bread. Now, jumping from Machne Yehuda Food Market to the Old City, I would like to introduce us to Ayman. Ayman stands here on the right-hand side. Ayman Shower from the Shower Muslim family. Their bakery, I'll show you a little bit more pictures of their bakery in just a minute, is located right in the middle of what we call Christian Quarter Road, very nice road. If you've ever walked down towards the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, you pass it every time that you go down there. They've owned this bakery for a few hundreds of years. They have very special ovens there. that, you know what, let me show you the oven and then I'll tell you more. I hope I optimize the video before where is it? Okay, I'm going to try to put the video on. I hope you can see well. I'll just tell you about the oven so that you understand what you're seeing. You see that from where he stands to the floor, there is, I don't know, maybe 2.5 feet or something, 2 feet depth. It's all filled up with salt and clay that were brought from the Dead Sea Basin. Have you ever cooked on salt? Have you ever put like, I know I don't cook much meat, but people do it with chicken. I put it sweet potatoes, whatever. You know that if you put salt in the oven, it keeps the heat for a very long time. So what they used to do in those old ovens, and these ovens used to be all over. Now we have only 2 of them left in Jerusalem. This is one of them. They heat it once, usually using olive wood, and then it stays warm hot for about 5 days, and it can continue cooking. The salt saves the heat, it saves energy. And one thing we need to understand when we're talking about Jerusalem is that one of the most important characteristics of Jerusalem is its location and what are the resources that are available to you. You've all been to Jerusalem, so you probably have the image of standing on top of, one of the outlooks and seeing, like a friend of mine used to make jokes at me. I've lived in Jerusalem for 20 years. He'd say, we in Tel Aviv, we're near the coast, we communicate with the world, we're open. And you in Jerusalem, wherever you look, there's a mountain. So the only thing that is left for you is raise your eyes up, and the only thing that you have is stones and conversations with God. And, kind of maybe. But in a way, he's right, because one of the main resources in Jerusalem is stone. No soil. When I was 30, I had this dream of growing my own vegetables, but we lived in Jerusalem area, so we tried to go and live in this moshav. There was one problem. There was no soil. We shuffled whatever, crazy. It's a long story. We had to create soil from manure of animals. It was like, okay, it's things that you do when you're young and you don't, whatever. So there's hardly any water, there's hardly any soil, there are hardly any resource, there is hardly any wood. If you want to have an oven, you need to have wood, so you can do anything to save energy. So this oven is about saving energy, and Ayman doesn't use that much the olive wood anymore. He heats it up, and you'll see how he. Now this oven is huge. It's 15 feet deep, very, very big, and on top of it, you can actually sit, and I will show you. Okay, this is a little bit more of what the bakery looks like, and let's see. So let's see how it works in the oven. I hope you can hear.
We can't hear, but we can see. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's the sound is not. I probably forgot to optimize the sound. It's just noisy, nothing else. So you know that mostly today we find many women bakers in many of the boutique bakeries in Israel, but for generations, women did not work in bakeries because it's too hard of physical work. It's like hours and hours near the oven. It's hard work. Now, an interesting thing that is happening, I showed you the spelt pita bread, but Ayman, of course, they bake like they have a regular oven where they bake what's called khubz in Arabic, which is what we call pita bread. But during COVID, when we all had time and tons of people baked during COVID, tons of people, they started making sourdough breads and bringing European tradition breads to be baked in the Arab oven in the old city and playing with it, him and his friend, the chef. Now I'm going back to Ayman for a minute because Ayman taught me a lot of things about the role of bread in Islam. You know that both in Judaism and Christianity, bread is installed into the cycle of rituals. It's there. We'll talk about it. We'll see it in just a moment. In Islam, you don't find bread in the organized religion that much, but it has a huge role in people's lives. And one of the things that he taught me is that the grain of the wheat, this is Yair, my son, these are his hands, and these are the wheat fields that are growing right there. Like my morning jog, my everyday, like I wake up very early and I go out running in the fields, and it's all wheat. And now it's all cut and waiting to be collected. And I keep on thinking of Ruth when I jog there, like and I'm just with these images. So what Ayman taught me is that the grain is covered by 7 layers, and he said, like the 7 layers heavens in the sky, this is how. And he said, bread is holy, bread is God-given. That's why you shouldn't throw it away. So if a piece of bread would fall in Ayman's bakery, he would pick it up and he would put it somewhere high. A bread would come and a hungry person would come, someone would come. And you would see the same tradition of not throwing away bread with everybody that I know in this region, which are connected to tradition. Nobody, Christians, Muslims, just nobody would throw away bread if they're connected to their tradition. And another thing is that if you would come to Ayman's bakery, if you would come with me, if you would come alone as well, he would always feed you and he would never take your money. And I said, like, Ayman, but you need to make money. You need to make a living. And he said, listen, bread is not mine. Bread was given to me by God. I'm the messenger. Now you eat. He gets insulted if I want to pay. He said, no, it's not mine. I'm just a messenger. So we already see that bread has a huge role in spirituality and in connection between people. And, bread was always the way to welcome people into, especially into Jerusalem. If you open the Bible and you read about Abraham coming into Jerusalem, Melchizedek, king of Salem, welcomes him with wine and bread. Okay, so probably, I don't know, when you, Marcy, when you receive your groups, do you do that? Do you take them to the house promenade with bread and all of that? Like we used to do it so many times, of a group coming and we take them.
I've done it. I've done it with some groups.
Some
It's
this
a
big
beautiful thing
challahs
to
and like,
do.
yeah. A little story. This is from this little picture is from a place that I don't know if the word is love, that I'm very connected to in Jerusalem. It's called Karmei Ha'ir. It's one of the most interesting and inspiring soup kitchens in Jerusalem. Do you know it? Have you been there? I don't, okay. This guy who grew up in Achlaot became very well off, made a nice, business, got a heart attack at 50, and decided that he is going to change his life and he's not going, he doesn't want to do this crazy stuff, business work anymore. And he opened this NGO, which is all about supporting people in need. And one of the things that they do is they have a soup kitchen. Except for this, they send hundreds of meals every day to Holocaust survivors. They give, tooth treatments to drug addicts. They do tons of things. So when you enter this place, it looks like a restaurant. I didn't take a picture inside because, like, people sit there, and I don't know. I didn't feel comfortable taking pictures when people were sitting there. So I'm just telling you about it. It looks like a little restaurant, like a nice restaurant. You sit down, they serve you food. The people who work there are all convicted criminals that are, doing their service by working in a place like this, and they, instead of sitting in jail. And at the end of the meal, you get a note with the bill, and you can take the note and fold it. And if you have money, because people sometimes would come and eat there in order to make a contribution to the place, they're going to fold it and they're going to put it in this box. The box says in Hebrew, Ish kematnat yado, כברכת השם אלוקיך אשר נתן לך. Each person is the gift of this hand. Sorry, it's free translation. As the blessing of your God that has blessed you, that is given to you. And it comes from, well, I'm not, you know what, I'm going to leave that. It's too much information. So anyways, you can either put the note without money, or you can put the note with money. Nobody's going to look. Nobody's going to do anything. And one day, I'm there, and this homeless guy is going out. Like, he didn't tell me he was homeless, but I could imagine that he was homeless. He looked like a homeless guy. And he held a piece of bread in his hand. Now, this place serves breakfast and lunch, and it was after lunch. And I was looking at him holding this bread, and I'm thinking, wow, this is probably the last thing that he's going to eat until tomorrow morning. So he's taking something for later. And the next thing that I see is this guy walking out, taking this piece of bread, breaking it into crumbs, and the birds are coming and eating. And sorry, each time that I tell this story, it's like I'm looking at this guy and I'm thinking, what does it feel like to not even be able to provide yourself for a home, but you are not able to provide yourself for a meal? How do you walk in the world? How do you feel? How straight do you walk? Yeah. Do you feel connected? And suddenly, in this tiny act, you're becoming a part of this huge thing that is called life, because you've contributed to someone who needs something that you could give. And bread flattens hierarchies. Everybody has accessibility to bread. Everyone. The rich, the poor, the old, the young, all of us have accessibility. You know, I gave this talk a lot during lockdowns, and we were all having really hard times. And I said to myself and to my kids and to whoever wanted to listen, I said, you know, we could put some crumbs, and we did, on the window, and the birds would come, and we're in communication. You can always do something for somebody else, and this is, for me, this is the meaning of belonging and coming out of homelessness, because we can all have homes and still feel homeless. So yeah. So bread is a lot about giving and receiving. Who's giving and who's receiving? Bread is about connection to God and about a moment of connection to ourselves. And bread is about passing on messages. And one of the questions that we want to ask is, what is the message? The word baker in Hebrew, I don't know if you're familiar with it, the old biblical word for baker, the current word that we use is ofe or ofa, depending on your gender. But the biblical word is nachtom. Nachtom is the one who signs, and I saw your beautiful signatures on the bread that you showed us before, because every baker has their signature. It's like, and what we see in front of our eyes are bread stamps from different cultures and different times. And you can see that here on the left-hand side, this is an old Jewish menorah stamp from the 6th century. It was found in the north of Israel in Akko. This one up here on the top is a Bukharian bread. It's called lipioshka. There's a beautiful Bukharian bakery in Shuk HaTikva, in the Tikva market in Tel Aviv, and they use this iron stamp to just make this beautiful mandala in the center of the bread, of the lipioshka. And I don't know if it has any. It doesn't have any religious meaning, but it, you know, how it changes the experience when you eat such aesthetic bread. On the right hand side here, this is me holding in my hand. I actually have it here. This is the Greek Orthodox. You see, a Greek Orthodox bread stamp, which is really telling the whole story of the crucifixion and the resurrection of Christ in icons. You know, we're all back into the world of icons. How many of you use emojis instead of words? Yeah, like how many of us use text instead of talking, and then emojis instead of words, and then I don't know what's the next phase going to be, telepathic communication or something. Yeah, streams of energy, whatever. So we didn't invent anything, right? This is a language. This is a story. And if you're a Greek Orthodox who knows to read a story, when this is stamped on the bread, you know exactly what's there. Now, Serafima, this elder, this picture was taken 20 years ago. Okay, she's not as young anymore. She was the chief baker in the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate, right attached to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and she was responsible for baking the holy bread and the blessed bread. There are a few different types of breads in the Christian Orthodox world. And she has the most amazing collection of ancient bread stamps made of stone for each of the different holidays, for each of the special days. Every bread carries a different story, okay, just on it. Of course, these are the Catholic, okay, little breads. And you know the difference between the Catholic and the Catholic and the Orthodox, Christian Orthodox, and I think I have it somewhere here. I'll show you here. The Catholics have something which is more flat, like a matzah, and the Orthodox would have bread that is, fermented. And the reason for that is their understanding of when the Last Supper happened. The Greek Orthodox say it was one day before Passover, therefore Christ and his fellows ate, fermented bread. The Catholics say it was the Seder, so Christ and his fellows ate matzah. Therefore, their communion bread would be matzah. Okay, so, but to go with the bread that we saw before, we have modern bread stamps and lots of modern, boutique bakeries now in Israel. This little video was taken by a friend of mine. Her name is also Tamar. She has a bakery a few miles this way from me. Very interesting bakery. This is her stamping her bread. It's called Yugen. But what they're doing is they are growing their own wheat. They're going back to growing ancient types of wheat that used to grow in the land of Israel years and years and years ago and were almost lost. And they grow their wheat in their farm and they use it to make some of their breads. And there are more and more bakers in Israel today. There is a seed bank that held the ancient species of wheat. I think in the commercial world today, we're using just a few species. And if we won't keep the variety, they may all be lost, one disease or whatever, and we're done. So it's a matter of taking care of, our future, but I think it's also a matter of connecting to our past. Because when you live on this land and you read about Ruth and our ancestors, and you want to become a part of the fabric of the land, you want to bake with the same species that were grown here during biblical time. And what it does when you eat it, it's always, you've talked about it so much. It's not just about the piece of bread, it's about the story. So when I eat it, I become a part of a very ancient chain that's been here for such a long time. And yeah, we went out and we've been to Europe, but we're back. Okay, we're rebuilding our identity. So how are you doing? How awake are you? Lechai, didn't bring my wine. Maybe you want to drink yours if you have any or something to.
It's a little early here, but we're with you.
It's before
For
noon.
me, it's always too early. I can't drink so bad. No, it's okay. Water is good. Where do we find bread? bread ceremonies or the presence of bread. So one place would be life cycle events from the birth, and this is an amazing pictures from Pidyon Haben. I forgot, Marcy, could you remind me the name of the ceremony in English?
Oh,
When the baby,
redemption of the firstborn
redemption,
son.
sorry, the first born son of the family needs to be redeemed, and they make those crazy huge challahs for this. This is, of course, First Communion in the Syrian Orthodox community in Jerusalem. Wedding breads that I'll share with you a little bit as we move on, and bread that accompany people to their death. Now, this is a Muslim special bread that is called akaik el asfal, and it's eaten around in morning time. You know that both in Judaism and in Islam, you eat round things when a person dies to remind us that the world is, a circle, that life goes on, and yeah, and the eggs are also a part of it. So we have life cycle events, and we have, of course, the weekly events with the two challahs in the Jewish tradition and the communion in the Christian tradition, and we have holidays. I have friends and I know people who bake special, different challahs for every holiday, Yom Ha'atzmaut, Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah. This is a special Purim bread, and these are special Easter breads. This is right now being celebrated in Jerusalem, the Greek Orthodox Easter bread with the red egg on the inside. This is a huge whale challah taken to a special tish, special ultra-Orthodox celebration during Purim, and of course Passover with a special matzah that is being baked. So bread is built into our story of the Jewish people. It's built into our holidays, because you know that each one of our holidays has different layers. One of them is the religious story. One of them is the, let's say, national story, but one of them is connected to nature. So Passover is when we start harvesting, and Shavuot is when we collect, and Sukkot is the end of the time of, when we collect well, Shavuot is the harvesting of the wheat, and Passover is the harvesting of the barley, and then Sukkot is the end of the time of collection and going out and starting to pray for the rain, and it's this cycle. One of the things that really, 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 really shocked me was this. Many years ago, there was an exhibition of bread that were brought from Europe, and what I saw there was bread amulets. Breads that accompany people if they're sick, when a baby is born, as a blessing, as protection from evil eye, just different images. These are like a few little images of that. And if we spoke about Ruth and coming, with the story as she comes with Naomi back to Beit Lechem, the house of bread, yeah. By the way, the name Lechem was the name of a goddess, a Canaanite goddess, which was connected to fertility and whatever. She probably saw bread amulets or wheat amulets like this hung on the walls of the houses. This one is made by local Arabs. It's called Birket el Chasida. It's the blessing of the harvest. And as the harvest starts, you go into the field, you pick them when they're green. You whip them and you put them outside of the houses, and I like to call it homeopathy or homeopathic prayers, because it's like in the shortest day of the year, we light a little bit of light in order to say, okay, God, can you please send us more of this warm sun, light? Yeah. So when you put a little bit of this, you say, God, can you please give us a lot? Make this harvest work. Make this year, make this year successful. It's a way of communication again. This is my daughter's hands. I really hope that she fell asleep. She had a hard time and she was like, Mom, can I get it? Okay. If she gets in, she'll say hi. When COVID started, she's 9.5 now. When COVID started, she said, Mom, like the first lockdown, she said, Mom, I need to knead. She didn't say I need to bake. She said, I need to knead. I need to work with dough. Now, she's been baking since she was, I don't know, 2 years old or something. She's been working with dough, with do it a lot. And I said that she knows what she needs. The amount of flour that we bought during lockdown was just unbelievable. And you know what? It's not just us. There was a shortage in high quality flour in the world last April. People were just in craziness baking. So for us, it's a lot about challah. This is her, braiding. This is a little bit of one day of, being at home. These are the better ones are the ones done by my kids. And I watched them and I realized, and I think one of you said before, I didn't catch the name, about this thing of baking at home and eating what you bake. But when I watched them working with the dough, I realized how smart she was to know what she needed. Because when you take, just imagine, try to take a piece of a little bit of flour in your hand. Can you hold on to it? No. Try to hold water in your hand. Can you hold on to it? But you put it together and you put your energy into it, and your work and whatever, and your emotions and your spirit, and something happens there and it becomes the most substantial thing. And in times of crisis and in times of anxiety, you can create substance, and the bread that you created becomes a metaphor to how do I ground myself in times like this. And you need to be patient, because it's a process, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And there are so many things, so many learnings just through this playing with dough, um, that I was really, really grateful for her intuition, knowing what she needed. How Okay, so one of the things that I really found fascinating, I think I mentioned before that one of my main researches is around the hero's journey. I know, is any of you familiar with the hero's journey by Joseph Campbell? I'll say a few words about what, and then if you want, you can hear the next talk that I'm coming out with is about that. Hero's journey is a narrative or an archetype of a story that repeats itself in a variety of mythologies. There was an amazing comparative anthropologist named Joseph Campbell who did a crazy research comparing great myths from Judaism, Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, Greek mythology, you name it, he was there. And he found that he called it the monomyth, which is like a DNA of a story that repeats itself, I think, and we're going to see it in a minute here with the Jewish story. I call it the Jewish hero's journey. How and what he says, and Carl Jung was working with the hero's journey archetype in his with his patients also, and people today work with the hero's journey for screenwriting, for books. They work with it in therapy, in coaching, like different fields, in advertisement. It's basically about how people change and how you go about a change. And there's always a home base when something happens and you need to find a solution to a problem, and the solution cannot be found at your home base, so you need to go on a journey. And the journey is always outside of your comfort zone and of your known world. So you go, like the people of Israel, you go into the desert. Okay, so I'm going to take us a little bit through the cycle of the Jewish hero journey, the way I understand it. And the thing that I found is that it's completely accompanied by bread. And the Jewish hero's journey starts in a place called the Garden of Eden, where we basically had it all. We had it all. Everything was there, but we were not able to live with that. We could not, work with the temptation. We had to eat from the forbidden fruit, and therefore we were expelled. You see text of a song here, which is in Hebrew. I can sing it to you in Hebrew if you want. That talks about this journey, how הגעתי לעולם מרום ויחל, פוסע לבד וחושב, אנשי הציע לי הארץ הטובה, את מה שנתן לאל. מים מתוך הבאר, לך מתוך התנור, פן של מלח ופרח מפרי העץ האסור. I came into the world barefoot and naked. I was stumbling down until the good land has offered me what God has given to her, to the land, which is water out of the well, bread out of the oven, and a little bit of salt and a slice of the forbidden fruit. That's a modern take on the story of Gan Eden, but really we had it all. We didn't need to go to the well, we didn't need to go to the oven, we had it all, but we could not. So we did what we were not supposed to do, and we got punished. And the punishment, the first place where bread appears in the Bible is in the punishment. Now, for the man, by the sweat of your brow you shall eat your bread. Okay, you have to work hard, you're going to sweat. For women, with painful labor you'll be given birth, you'll give birth to children. And today for women both, because we do this and we do this, and we're sweating and giving birth and all together. And this is basically the beginning of the agricultural revolution, right? When we need to start cultivating the land. And a little story about the pain of delivery and bread. I became a mother at a pretty old age. I'm 49 now, my daughter is 9, okay? So I waited a long time. And when it was time and I was pregnant, a very good friend of mine, which is an ultra-Orthodox lady from Jerusalem, she said, listen, it was Passover and I was due in Rosh Hashanah. She said, take a bit of the afikoman and keep it in the freezer, and when it's time to give birth, put it in your mouth and it's gonna make your delivery easy. So I was like, this is me pregnant, like with this one that you just saw. And I was like, okay, what wouldn't you do for an easy delivery, right? So whatever you say, I took a piece, it was in my freezer. By the time I gave birth, who remembered it was in the freezer, okay? But anyways, she's here. After she was born, my mom said, hey, you have this piece in the freezer. I said, you give it to me anyways, I'll take it now. But anyways, a lot of people in the ultra-Orthodox, especially in the Hasidic world, connect what we call sgulot in Hebrew, or virtues, to different objects, and one of them is bread. We'll talk about it more in just a moment. But here we are, deported from the Garden of Eden. We have to work the land. And then we come to time when there is drought and there is no food. So what do the people of Israel do? They have to go on a journey to search for food. Where do you go? You go to Egypt. Egypt is the homeland, you can say, of fermented bread. They've been baking leavened bread for 6,000 years now. And Egypt always has food. One of the amazing things about Egypt is that it never rains. The water comes through the Nile. They never see the rainfalls, but there's always water there. So we sit there and there is food and life is okay and, pretty well. And we go there 70 and we become, so many. And why should you leave? We have food, life is, it's like a lot of people, what is there to do in this crazy land? There is no land of Israel. It's barren, no resources. Why should you go back? So in order to go out on a journey, you need very strong motivation. And the strong motivation is, of course, slavery. It comes to a point where you can't stand it anymore. Usually when we move is when we can't stand it anymore. So it's time to move. And what accompanies this move out from Egypt? Again, bread. Baking, the story of quickly baking matzah to take it into the desert. The word matzah comes from the word mitsui, which is lematzot, to get to the essence of things. Yeah. Whereas the leavened bread and always matzah in Judaism resembles humbleness And most of the korbanot, most of the bread offerings in the temple were matzah offerings. Only on Shavuot, which is the holiday of gratefulness for the receiving the Torah, is when they brought leavened bread to the temple. But I'm jumping, sorry, I'm very associative. So the bread that accompanies the people of Israel, okay, like this object that accompanies you when you go out of the known into the unknown, is matzah, and it's there for about a month. There is bread for a month, but then the people of Israel are in the desert, and they're like, what now? Often in Pesach we say it's from slavery to freedom. I say, hell no, it's not from slavery to freedom. It's from slavery to desert. It was for 40 years of search, 40 years of a need to let go of the slavery mentality so that people could renew their mindset and go into the land as people that could live there independent. So what accompanies this process? Again, bread, because the next thing that happens when the people of Israel are hungry is, of course, this magical bread called manna that comes from the heavens, and this statement that's saying, okay, God humbled you, causing you to hunger, and feeding you with the manna which neither you or your ancestors had known, to teach you that man does not live by bread alone. I chose to give the name of this talk is by bread but not alone. And this is where it comes from, because this is what we needed as people to learn. We needed to learn faith. We needed to learn how to rely on something that is unseen and that is greater than us in order to go back into the land. So we're accompanied by these 40 years by the month that, of course, you were not allowed to collect. You had to eat each day for today, and that's it, except for one day a week, which is, of course, the reason why we have 2 loaves of bread on our Shabbat meal, as a memory for the ability to collect 2 portions of manna just before the Shabbat in the desert. So whenever we go into a Shabbat table, we go back to this memory. But then, as the people of Israel are walking through the desert, and they're on their way to the Promised Land, and before the Promised Land, a very important event should happen, and we're going to celebrate it in a very short time from now, which is, of course, the receiving of the Torah. After the receiving of the Torah, after on the way, God promises the people of Israel, and this is a beautiful Shavuot bread that was done by an artist called Smadar Zorea Baumak. It's just an amazing, amazing bread. And God basically said, listen, folks, don't worry. It's been hard, but I'm taking you to a land where bread will not be scarce, and you will lack nothing. When you've eaten and are satisfied, praise the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. Remember the beginning of the story? Why do you throw away bread? Bread is a blessing. What blessing? What? Yeah. If you bless, then you will not feel the scarcity. Now, a little story. I was 20 years old when I came to live in Jerusalem. The summer of 1992, I believe, or three. I got to guide a group of 16-year-old kids from Ramah seminars. Okay, it was my first time I was guiding a group from America. I had a very short experience with North American Jews as a teenager when I lived in America for 6 months. But I get to this big dining room, and tons of teenagers, and they sit there, and suddenly they all go and they do this thing, which I never saw, this thing with the water, and then everybody's silent. Like, when did you see a group of 16-year-olds silent? And I'm like, what's going on here? And I'm trying to talk and I realize that I should shut up. And then one of the guys stands up and he says, and he breaks the bread. It's the first time in my life, I was 20, growing up in Israel, first time in my life that I saw this. And then once he's done, whoa, noise again. And then at some point, this guy says, okay, guys, let's say the birkat. And I'm like, what? And they start, Baruch atah Adonai. And I'm shocked. I have no clue what's going on there. Now, it's Ramah seminars. If you know Ramah seminars, part of their curriculum is to go every morning and pray. I never held a siddur in my hands, ever. And this is something that I always say when I meet people from North America, is the guys, I owe American Judaism my Jewish identity. Because what I have learned through my encounter in the past 30 years with a variety of communities from North America has built my ability to create a meaningful, relevant Jewish identity for myself, for my family, and for many other non-religious Jews that I educate today. This is a very big part of my mission. I give talks about the holidays, and I just try to make it relevant. Because one of the problems, I think, in our society is the split. You're either this or nothing, or you are a cultural Jew, but you're not connected to any of the depth that is there. So this is really, it's the gift of my life, really. It's just so rich, and I owe it. And this was like this one moment when I realized that, wow, I know nothing, and I still know nothing. I just know a little bit more than I knew 30 years ago. And this moment also, you know, a lot of us are into mindfulness. Raise your hand if you practice mindfulness meditation. You're in San Francisco, right? You have to practice mindfulness. Right? Where you're in San Francisco, right? No. We're all into mindfulness now, right? For me, this is mindfulness. Because I told you that I don't eat bread, right? I stopped eating bread, I don't know, 15 years ago, I think, probably 14, 13, I don't remember exactly when. Because what this does is say, okay, you want to eat? No problem. Wash, pause, say a blessing, pause, take a look at your bread, stop, don't behave, stop, be aware of what you're doing. Okay, that's mindfulness. And for me, through my process, I realized that eating bread doesn't support my ability to be mindful. It just makes me too crazy. So I put it aside, like all kinds of other things. But it was through this process of saying, wow, there are so many times in the Jewish day that you're invited to be mindful, so you can take advantage of it, right? Going back to the cycle, to the hero's journey, because the people of Israel are still in the desert, they're on the way, but where will the temple, the Jewish temple, be built when they already make it into the land of Israel? Temple Mount sits on a threshold. What was there before King David built it? The exact spot where today the Dome of the Rock stands is a guy named Aravna, who was a Jebusite. He had his threshold. In ancient world, thresholds were always in the high spot of the village where the wind comes.
Wait, I think you're trying to say threshing floor.
Threshing floor, thank you, right. The threshold is where you, the staff is what you pass. Thank you. I'm too in this. I'm in the hero's journey world the whole day, more or less. You have to cross the threshold in order to go to the journey. So thanks. So what do you do in the threshing floor? You separate, right? Tafel ve'ikar. The non-important flies in the air and the important thing stays. Exactly what you do in spiritual work. So a lot of the ancient shrines were sitting on the bases of threshing floors. I want to take us to another cycle, another place where bread is found. And remember what I had asked you before, what happens if you try to hold the flour separate, the water separate, and how it fades away. But what happens when you put it together? But what happens if you forget it and something happens and you run away and it's left out for a few hours and you come back, and let's say you are in a microscopic world, okay, and you don't know anything about chemicals and yeast and whatever, and you just leave it out and you come back and it's like, whoa, what happened to this? And what would this resemble? What could this be a metaphor for, if not this? So in many, many, many cultures, the rising over the bread is connected directly to the rising of, the belly and the growing baby inside, of course. And again, yours were so much nicer, I have to say. I should get your pictures and put them into my thing. And remember, Hassan here is holding the ashtanur and talking about how the oven is like the womb. And even if you look into the Bible, when Moses runs away, a lot of the time when you hear a call to go on a journey, your first reaction would be a refusal. Like, I'm not doing this. So he comes out of the palace and he sees this Egyptian and he beats him up and then he runs away. Where does he run away to? He runs away to Midian, and there some young women are going down to the well. Seven sisters. It's a tragedy. 7 sisters walking together. It means that none of them is married. In the ancient world, it's tragedy. These are the daughters of Jethro, the priest, and he tells his daughters, look, maybe this man would want to eat some bread, which is basically saying maybe he's going to take one of you and get married. Okay, lechem, isha, woman, and bread are often appearing in the Bible as you help me with my language. It's past 9 o'clock. My English is deteriorating every moment now. I'm sorry. I apologize. No, it's fun. So, and we see bread present in this is the Hebrew text about that, present in a lot of feminine practices, and one of the most beautiful one is the ceremonial dough separation of Rashat Chala. Are you doing any of that? You are? Like anyone is involved in that? It's for those who are not that familiar with that, the ceremony is about whenever you have to bake a specific amount of dough. It comes from the time when the temple existed in Jerusalem, where the priest would do the spiritual work for the people, and the people would feed the priest. So you would take a certain portion of your dough and you would bring it to the temple as an offering to the priests, like in order to support them. Leah Tali, this lady, this is also it's a pretty old picture by now. She lives in the old city in Jerusalem, the Jewish quarter. Her son was killed in a terrorist attack many years ago, and she started baking. She makes, I'll show you some of her works. You see, this is, I just dragged a picture here to show you a bit of what she does. She has many grandchildren, and every week she bakes different challahs that are connected, their shapes are connected to the portion of the week, and her grandchildren, they have to figure out what's the story, why did she make these figures, and it's this game that she's doing. Here she's hosting a group of mine in her home, telling us, showing us, doing the ceremony with us. But the challah, what we call challah, the word challah, by the way, we today use it to name the bread, but the word challah in the Bible doesn't mean bread. It means a portion of the dough. Okay? There is a beautiful saying that when God created the world, he separated man as the challah of the world. He took the man and created him, just like you separate the challah from the dough and shaped him. Today in Israel, you find lots of very big women circles meeting, working with the dough together, praying, asking. It's like very crazy events, but actually this event is very, very spiritual. It could be very, very personal, very intimate. It's really a time when, it's a time for the woman. I mean, everybody can do it, but traditionally, orthodoxly speaking, it's one of the only 3 mitzvot that really a woman has to do. Okay, that are connected to, they're not connected mitzvot aseh. Okay, I'm not going to go into the whole thing. I'm sure you'll have other time to deal with it, but it's amazing to think that there are only 3 things, and bread making and this challah separation is one of them, just to tell us how important the bread is in our consciousness, how it affects our consciousness. And this is a picture of chalat mafteach, ki challah, that was baked by a good friend of mine. You know, when you live in Jerusalem, you get a chance to become friends with people you would never ever think you'd meet. And I have some very close friends which are hardcore ultra-Orthodox, like from their upbringing. And one of my friends sent me this picture, which it's the challah that you make right after Passover. And I may have a video here to show you, maybe I'll show you at the end, of how you see all those little signs here. After they made the challah, they take the key of the house and they stick it into the challah as they say the prayer. And it's a very, very, very intimate moment and process. But as I said, bread is also related to fertility, and at the, you know, in some of the cultures, you used to braid the bride's hair, just like the challah, and to let her sit on a big like pot filled with dough. Or when you go to the mikveh, to the ritual bath, one of the things in some traditions is, you know, you have to completely immerse yourself in the water, and as you go out and you take the breath, whoa, they shove a piece of sweet bread into your mouth, just so that you know, connect to what is expected of you. Where are you headed to? And one of the really beautiful rituals that is connected to this is a Hasidic an ultra-Orthodox wedding. You hardly see the bride and the groom together. The moment when you see the bride and the groom together is just as they're approaching the yichud room, the room when they're going to be sitting for the first time in their lives together, like, you know, in a closed room. Until now, they had to be only around other people. Now, can you see this round challah that is being held here? Okay, and the guy, you know, both of they're Ashkenazi, they fasted, they didn't eat the whole day. Very spiritual day, but also very hard. So here comes the question: Hakala, which is the bride, or Hachala, which is the chala, the bride, or the kala? And you should answer the correct answer. And the correct answer should be, I'm hungry. No, you should choose this. But after you say the right answer, they break the challah above your heads. You see, this is another wedding, another couple. This is Toldot Aron, I think. Very, very extreme Hasidic group in Jerusalem. The challah is broken. It's called bagel de kala. You know where does the word bagel comes from? Bagel comes from Yiddish, be'igul, in a circle. Igul is a circle, and kigel is as a circle. So they break it. Some people say that it's a symbol for the thing that is expected to be broken at some point. And what do they do in this separate room when they are finally by themselves? Lots of myths around what's happening there, but the real story is they eat bread together. And this is what makes them into a family. The first meal with bread. Okay, now look at them, two young babies, so young, and yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
this is amazing, and we could go on for hours, and I don't know where you know, but time is,
So
we're almost out of time.
We'll end with this, okay? Because these are pictures that were sent to me by Amir. Amir is a Muslim Arab. He's the Arabic teacher of my kids at school. And this is him and his wife Haya when they got married. You see their hand here? You see her hand here? If you have the patience, I'll show you a short video that shows how they use bread in an Arab wedding. I'll explain to you. Oh, this is bread in Ethiopian wedding. And this is bread in East European weddings. with the salt inside, but we want the video, right? Okay, so I'll just explain to you what we're going to see because it may be, oh, you know what? I'll do stop share and I'll come back with the so that you can hear it, okay? Optimize sound, okay, share. Now, no. Okay, מה קורה פה? רגע, I may have it. No. Right. Okay, let's see. It takes us to YouTube, so it may, I hope it will work good. Okay. Okay, a word of explanation. The bride is being brought from her family to the groom's home. Okay, as they're approaching, you know what? Let's hear and then I'll show you what they're doing. You see that she has in her hand something. This is dough. Inside of the dough, there are flowers, and okay, her future mother-in-law is giving her strict instructions on how to make sure that the dough sticks to the wall. It's very important that it doesn't fall. Okay, let's look at that.
حط لها شو اسمه حط لها كرسي تطلع كرسي هناك على الطرف لا فوق الضي هناك فوق الضي الباب ما فيش عليه هناك لا ما يشملي يشملي روح قوتك روح قوتك
Everybody gives advice, everybody has something to say, it has to stick. Now the groom is going to do it. If it doesn't stick, it's bad luck. The thought is that the way this sticks to the wall, the marriage is going to hold, it's going to work. And if it doesn't stick, not good. Okay, so we can see more. By the way, you just saw that it was a Christian bride. You saw the cross, right? She put the cross. You see it in both Christian and Muslim Arabs everywhere in Israel. Now the guy. Did we get it? Is it enough? Okay, I'm gonna close this. Okay. So, okay. So we see that it's present everywhere. You know, my dad died many years ago, but whenever he would go to a new home, when people would move to a new home, he would always bring lechem and melach, the salt and the bread to symbol stability. And only many years after, I learned that in Eastern Europe, where his family came from, this is what couples would get as they enter their new home. You know, in Judaism, one of the traditions is that the newly married couples would put honey in the first year of marriage instead of salt. Last thing that I want to show you is, where is it? This. One of the most amazing holidays ever, the most touching moments for me, is being in the holiday called Sigd in Jerusalem. Ethiopian Jews who made their way walking to Israel, who made their crazy hero's journey, losing so many of their families along, you know, this crazy walk through Sudan in the desert. they keep on celebrating every year around November this holiday, Sigd, which is the longing to Jerusalem. They keep on celebrating it even when they're already in Jerusalem. These pictures are taken near the Western Wall. And at the end of the ceremony, you see what happens to a family that came from Ethiopia already probably about a generation ago. You see the traditional mother or sister. You see the guy who started being dressed like a European Litvak or Misnaged. You see the guy that wears a kippah like from, modern Orthodox, I would say, yeah. And they're all breaking bread together. Usually we're used to seeing the Ethiopian injera, but this is special ceremonial bread, which is baked for special holidays. And for me, it says a lot about the role of bread in longing, in connection, in bringing people together. This is me and my nephew baking bread together a few weeks ago. His father is Moroccan, his mother is my sister, so she's of course Polish, and we're making what he calls grandma bread. Going back to you, Marcy, with your grandma, his grandma makes this very big Moroccan bread, and we're just baking together as just as a part of the celebration when we sent his brother to go on his year before the army. So we started with the story of the bread, and with me seeing the crumbs and like, what are they doing there? And today my kids know that bread is not to be thrown to the garbage. And this is our window right here where we put the leftovers. This one has za'atar, hyssop on. And when we have a birthday, and I'm going to do it next week, we're taking bread and we're throwing it, to the birds to just say thank you for everything that we have here. So I want to thank you for allowing me to be with you and sharing a little bit of the unbelievable place of bread in the world. And as I said, it's by bread, but not alone. We all have different means to create connections and to be with us and with, this bigger thing than us that is around us and is sustaining us. Thank you so much.